Welcome everyone to Laravel Cape Town, August 2024. We are virtual for this one, and luckily so, considering it just started raining here again. Um, so yeah, I hope everyone's nice and toasty. We also have some friends from abroad this time around, especially our speaker, Mr. Simon Hamp. These days, well known for NativePHP and Laradir and being an awesome human in general. He'll be speaking to us tonight about Laravel Pennant and abusing it for fun and profit, which I think is going to be quite interesting because I always love using things in ways they're not intended to be. Just a bit of housekeeping for tonight. The usual business, we have a raffle for a JetBrains license for any product for 1 year. And if you're keen, I will post the raffle link in the chat. And what else is there? Our sponsors for the evening, we have none. We're fully independent for this meetup. Yeah, and that's all I have for this evening. I will post the link in the chat again. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. We can do a bit of a Q&A after the talk. It can be about Pennant, or if you'd like to chat about NativePHP or Laradir or anything else, we'll have some fun with that. And I pass off to Simon for now.
Thanks, Nick. That was an awesome intro. Hello, Laravel Cape Town. How are you all? It's nice to be with you. I'm sorry that you're having the rain. Yeah, winter will soon be over. Opposite of Game of Thrones, I think. So, thanks for making some time this evening as well. I appreciate that it's the end of the work day and you're not always up for too much more. So I'm going to try and keep it quite light this evening. I'll start my slides. We can go from there. We will do a little bit of coding, maybe. Let's get this. Can we see this? You got my slides now? Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, I say we'll jump out into some code in a bit. I just want to go through a little bit of a background on Laravel Pennant before we get to that point. And of course, first of all, although Nick's done a great job, I am just going to introduce myself. I am Simon Hamp. I am a long-time PHP developer. I'm freelance right now. I would consider myself to be an open source enthusiast. As Nick said, I'm the creator of NativePHP, and I also run Laradir. What's NativePHP? I hear you asking. Well, if you've ever wanted to try and build desktop applications using PHP, this is the latest and greatest incarnation of attempting to do that. I think you'll like it. It's in alpha at the moment, and I'm working very hard on it to try and get it to the point where we can use it in production-ready applications. And what the heck is Laradir? Laradir is the biggest directory of Laravel engineers. And I would love to have you on there if you're not already there. Basically, it's trying to connect great Laravel developers like yourselves with great Laravel teams. You might already be part of a great Laravel team. Wonderful. I'm happy for you. But if you're not, get your profile on Laradir and let's find you a great team to work with. Fun fact, I was, prior to this, head of software at a company called LV. I spent 6 years there, and I helped bring one of the first wireless, tubeless, almost silent breast pumps. Yes, I said breast pumps to the market. If you know anybody who's used a breast pump, you'll know that there's a lot of problems with that technology. I'm not here to talk about breast pumps, but one of the things that I learned while I was working at this company is how to look at problems differently. And that stuck with me. There are many people who worked in that team that, sorry, I need to, yeah, that's it. I'm forgetting where my slide was. There are many people who worked in that team who I learned great things from. And the most important lesson that I learned was how to look at problems differently. The greatest benefit of that was that it encouraged the whole team, me included, to push the boundaries of what's supposed to be possible. If you don't push the boundaries of what you're supposed to do, you'll never innovate. At the worst, if you do this, you'll just find that, you can't do a thing a certain way, or that you shouldn't do a thing a certain way. But at its best, you'll discover a whole new way of seeing the world. And when you look at things in this new way, you might see patterns about how things are similar or how they're different, but they could be used in new and unusual ways. And I want to talk about one of those tonight. So we're going to be talking about Laravel Pennant. What is Laravel Pennant? You might know that it's a package to help with feature flags. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a Laravel package that was created by Tim McDonald, who is now a Laravel core team member. And it helps you to create and manage feature flags through your application. Now, I'm not here to teach you Laravel Pennant. We are going to look at it a little bit. As I said, we'll look at some code. But if you really want to learn how to use it properly and well, you should read the docs. And there's also a great video by this guy called Aaron, who is on the internet a lot lately, which you should also watch. I'm sure there'll be a way for me to share my slides so you can get these links. But why do we want to use Laravel Pennant? I think everyone should be using feature flagging. Whatever application you're building, whether it's big or small, whether you're on your own or a part of a larger team, feature flagging is a really useful feature of your application. And at some point or other, you will reach for it in whatever form you choose to implement it in. So why not start off with Laravel Pennant, where it's been thought about for you? You might already be doing it, but you might not be using Laravel Pennant. So why should you use Laravel Pennant instead? Well, first of all, it's a first-party Laravel library, and it's supported by the Laravel team. Tick, that's great. It's tightly integrated into Laravel, as you'd expect. So with just a couple of commands, you can get going and you're away. Like within a minute, you've got it installed. Within 10 minutes, you've probably written your first feature and you're already using the library to do what it's supposed to do. Fantastic. This is what we love about Laravel, the speed of development. So tick, we got that as well. It has direct access to your application. What do I mean by that? Well, it means that you don't need to send your data out to another service or a third party. This lowers risk and it also reduces your testing complexity. You could, for example, have this as part of a monolithic application and you run your test suite over the whole lot. You've got different tooling within Pennant to actually run your tests against Pennant and understand your features and how they apply throughout the life cycle of your application. And so then you get to a point where everything is all self-contained, which is quite nice. If you're using a third-party service, you wouldn't necessarily have that. And that does make things a little bit trickier. Of course, because we're not using an external service, there's not going to be a subscription or a cost involved with that. That might be important to you. These things aren't usually that expensive, but by comparison, this is a completely free package. It's fully open source. You haven't got to ship data out, as I said, so there's no risk in data being abused or, yeah, going out of your control. And so overall, it could reduce your costs, which is a nice additional thing. And finally, because there's no external service to worry about, your application is no longer reliant upon the availability or performance of some application at a distance over the network. So those are just a few good reasons why you should consider using Laravel Pennant if you're thinking about doing feature flagging. I think, as I've said, everybody should be doing feature flagging. So just go and install Laravel Pennant. I've been using it in production on Laradir for a few months now. I know that's not a long time, but I've come across a few things that I think are worth pointing out. So I've initially started, I think I still technically do use the closure-based feature definitions, which is one way of defining features in Pennant. But I have come to realize that it would be better to use the class-based ones. So my recommendation to you is use class-based features, as these give you greater control, flexibility, and compatibility. We'll look at that in a bit. Write tests. Yep. Again, recommendation to write tests. You could argue that feature flags aren't super critical for testing in certain cases, but I think it's good practice just to have the assertions around when you expect a feature flag to be set and when that is set, what you should see on the page or what functionality your application should make available to your user. So just have very simple tests that assert the outcome of the result of a feature check. And finally, don't be afraid to flush. There is, maybe flush is the wrong word, purge is probably a better word, but there is a way to purge the cache of feature flag checks within Pennant. And basically, you shouldn't worry about data persistence in Pennant. The persistence is in code, really. The code defines the outcome of the check. The database or whatever other data storage mechanism you use is really just a cache. So you should feel comfortable purging that as often as you need. You'll probably do it more during development, less so in production. But again, get to a point where you feel comfortable that running a purge or a flush will not be a problem for your application. Cool. Those are our top tips out of the way. So what is a feature flag? If you don't know, a feature flag is what determines if a given entity has been assigned a certain feature. What do we mean? Well, you could think of an entity as an example, as a user. And that user has been given the ability to, say, create backups in let's say our application is a SaaS, that's a hosting service. And some accounts have access to that feature and some accounts don't. So a flag is what determines if the entity, the user, has been assigned the feature backups in this case. Folks use feature flags in, I would say, quite a limited set of ways. And when you think of feature flags, you've probably already got in mind, this is how I'm going to use this. Maybe this does or doesn't apply to me in my circumstances. But just to name a few, it might be that you want to steadily roll out a new feature to your entire user base, but you want to do it in a graded way. So you don't hit everybody with the feature straight away. And suddenly you're, thrown into the mire of dealing with a lot of bugs or support issues, that kind of thing. Okay, so you've got a steady release rollout process, which you could build in something like Pennant. You might be doing trunk-based development, where you basically commit all of the work you're doing to the main branch of whatever repository you're using. And so feature flagging is really beneficial because you might not want some of those maybe unfinished features to come out yet. So you'd want to, say, hide a whole feature from everybody behind a feature flag. Then you can extend on that. And the other way that people primarily think of using feature flags is for kind of beta testing or experimentation. So I've got this feature. I don't want to roll it out to everybody because it's not quite ready, but we want to start getting some early feedback from people, and maybe head off any issues at the pass before we roll it out to absolutely everybody. With Pennant, you define features as a function or a class, as we talked about, that both names the feature itself and encapsulates the logic for determining if the user has been assigned the feature. In Pennant, a feature is just a reference, a string. It could be a human-friendly short name like backups, or it could be a fully qualified class name. In most cases, the result of a feature flag check is just a Boolean value, so true or false. And that just determines if the user does or does not have access to that given feature. But in Pennant, it can be more than that. You can return data structures, more rich data, and that can be useful in other ways. But for now, we'll just focus on the Boolean. Yes, it's on. No, it's off. Looking at this description of feature flags, I think we can kind of generalize. We can see that feature flagging is great for controlling access to features, limiting them to groups of users based on variable criteria that we define. And when you look at it through that lens, feature flagging may open up for you in terms of what it can be used for. So we need to get our minds open right now. So we're going to take a second. I'm going to do just a little bit of head massage. Relax from the day. Thanks, Nick, for joining in. And just keep our previous thoughts about how feature flagging might be used in our application to one side. Ask yourself this question. Does feature flagging only have to be applied to features that you want to have behind a flag? Well, if feature flags are just Boolean to decide whether someone should be assigned a feature, surely the answer is, why not? Consider something we've kind of touched on, a subscription level. Isn't that just logic that defines whether a given feature should apply to a given user or team or organization? How do you codify features that apply to, say, a subscription level in your application right now? Maybe you've got some, I don't know, config file that just has an array of plans and prices and maybe some features, some limits about what usage somebody can get at a certain level. And then you've probably got some class somewhere in your code that looks at that config, takes in the user or the team or the organization, and does some lookup against some other records and tries to work out what are the thresholds that this particular account has got, what tools should they have available, what features within your application should they be able to access. That's all good. That's absolutely fine way to do it. But you know, that same problem looks exactly like this problem. So can we use Laravel Pennant for more than just feature flagging? Let's have a look. I'm going to dive into a bit of code now. So what do I want to do here to get this back? I'm going to Got that out of the way. We're going to have a look at this. So here I've set up an application. It's a brand new Laravel application. There's not much to it. In fact, there's basically nothing here. So all I've done is give us this kind of config file that I was talking about that you might have, plans. We've got 3 plans, basic, pro, enterprise, and they've got some very simple configuration. You could think of these as the features. I've called it limits just because they're variable amounts. This is irrelevant for our case, but maybe this looks something similar to what you might have done in another project. Now, I haven't got any example code of what this might look like if you were doing it another way, but what I want to show you is how you might handle access to these features based on this configuration in your application using Pennant. So what do we need first? Well, I've already installed Pennant. We're all ready to go. So I'm just going to get to a place where we can see what we need to build. So the first thing to do is to add a feature. So we're adding a class-based feature. We're going to call it backups. That should have created our features, which it has. And this is our class-based feature. Very simple. You only need this resolve method. So we're just going to add a bit of code in here. So I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff because I don't need it. In fact, we'll replace it with the bits that we do need. So I know that I'm going to need the user. I'm going to give this one a name because I want to reference it by name rather than the class name. So we'll call it backups. I'm just going to change this to be a bit more strict. We know that we're going to get a user. And, I think we're just going to return a Boolean. If that's the right one. So what do we want to do here? Let's have a think about what's happening. In these 3 plans, you can see that I've got this backups feature. It's got a limit of different values depending on the level that you're on. So if somebody's on a basic plan, they can't store any backups. Fine. So we don't want to give them access to that feature at all, maybe. And on a pro plan, they have more. On an enterprise plan, they have even more. So we could have something simple for now, just a first pass, just to check that Pennant is doing what we expect it to do, where we check the feature and then we can return some information back to the user based on whether or not they should have the feature. Yeah. So we basically want to match on. I've already added the ability for users to have a plan in the record. So we're going to have a look at the user plan. And we want to, thanks ChatGPT or whatever that is. It's kind of close, but not quite. You've distracted me now, you beast. If it's pro or enterprise plan, if I could spell enterprise, we want to say, yes, you have this feature. If not, either of those, oh, I've already done that bit, false. Does that make sense? Simple enough. So we'll check all of this works. Maybe it won't because I'm really terrible at live coding, but we'll check it in a second and we may come to fix it if it doesn't work. But in principle, we're doing something very, very easy. We've defined our feature. We're saying that when the user's plan is pro or enterprise, then the feature is enabled. If they're not on either of those plans, then it's not enabled. Then we can use that feature in a check in our, well, where do we want to be? What have we got? We've got just the basic home view. Let's have a look at this in the browser. I can get the browser up and we'll do, it's called Pennant test. So we've got the standard Laravel homepage. I'm not going to change any of that. In fact, let's just have a look at the template. Let's clear that out. Is this the right one? Yep. So, okay, got a clean template. I want to check the feature. Pennant comes with this nice blade directive. Let's just check a feature. I know that I want to use my backups feature. And we'll just say, yeah, okay, thanks. Let's have this for now. Backups are enabled. And we'll start with that. Okay, let's see what happens. Nothing. What else do we need? Oh, well, we haven't got a user. So I think this blade directive looks at the current user. So we need a user. I haven't got a login registration, so I'm going to cheat. But we can log in maybe as log in using ID 1. Fine. I know that I've got an ID, a user with ID 1. So let's see. See it. Still nothing. Okay. Let's just see in our database. Users 1, features, nothing. Something's not quite right, is it? I think I'm gonna just change this. I'm gonna go to, I want this to be my backups class. Because I know that I've got class-based features. I don't know if it's using that name. And I need to import the namespace, so I'm going to do app features backups. That should do. Refresh that. Still no. Oh, this isn't good. Oh no, look, we've got something in our table. What does this tell us? This tells us that the user with ID 1 does not have the backups feature. So this is our cache from Pennant. This is what we can purge when we need to, but it's computed based on the definition of our feature, just backups class. Okay. So now that we've been able to make something happen somewhere, we're on the right track. Let's change this up a little bit. Let's say for people who are entitled to use this feature, you are entitled to, say storing, we want to get the value from the config, because I haven't got another way of doing this at the moment. So it's plans, and then the name of the plan. So we'll have to get that from the user. I'm being really coarse with this, but not users, user plan. So that's the current user's plan name. And then what was it? Limits. And then we'll say, I think it's called backups. Let's check. Backups. Yeah. So if somebody's on a plan that has backups, then we should be able to get the number of backups out of that. Say storage backups. And then if they're not on that plan, let's do just a nice message that could maybe say, yeah, upgrade. Oh, please upgrade your plan. Thanks. I'll take that. So for this user number 1, we now get our message saying you can use the backups feature. That's pretty cool. And we could have some link there to encourage them to upgrade, etc. What about a user that does have it? let's go. We've got 2 users, and I've set the other one up on the enterprise plan. So let's see what happens from change the user to that one. Just refresh. Cool. You're entitled to storing 60. And let's have a look at what's happened in the database. Cool. User 2 does have access to this feature. Nice. Once that's set in the cache, it's kind of done. You can't really update it. You could manually update it. You've got access to your database. You can do whatever you want with it. This is your data. I'd be a little wary of doing that just because this is a Pennant's own cache, but there's nothing really stopping you from doing that. The simplest way to update these things is just purge them, as we said before. So we can do that. I think I've done an example of this already. So whoop, you just pass it the name of the feature that you want to purge. That's the wrong one. I'm looking at purge and I'm entering feature. So this should have cleaned this out. Yeah. Cool. So you can purge just a specific feature from the cache, or you can purge everything just by doing that. Now, this might not look like we've done anything wild or crazy, or that we've really thought about this process of doing feature flags in any unusual way. But I want to stop for a second and just think about that. This isn't a feature that necessarily has to be behind a feature flag. This could have just been code that we've written elsewhere. We've got a class that manages how subscriptions have features and they get applied, and different rules for how they apply to different users. But because we've now done that logic through Pennant, we've ended up with something else. Instead of it just being this very static thing in our code, we've now got a much more flexible configuration for our feature, which would allow us to use it in really interesting ways. So one of the ways that we could use it is, say, give the feature to a user who's not on one of those plans. Now, how would you do that? Well, I'm not going to go into all of that detail today, but I can tell you it's entirely possible with Pennant in this way. One of the things that I use, which I find really, really beneficial, I use filament. And you know what? I realized I think I might have said filament a few times when I meant Pennant, and I might say Pennant a few times when I mean filament, because those names are very similar. But I'm using filament in this project, and one of the plugins that you can get for filament, which is a very good one, is this feature management one. I think there's a couple of versions of this. There's one that's kind of free, and there's one that's maybe a bit more premium. If you're using filament and you want this clever ways of managing features, this is very cool. So we could, I don't know if this is going to work because I haven't tried it out, but maybe it will show the feature that I've got. No, it's not going to. I need to do a little bit more work on this to pipe up the feature into the filament plugin, and then this will do some more. But basically, what you'd be able to see is a nice user interface for how to add segments of your users and assign features and change the feature values assigned to specific users. So that's really powerful, because then you can do things like comping a specific feature to a specific user, or, controlling how all of your features across your application are being applied to individuals or teams or organizations. And I just think that that's a really, exciting place to be for your product, because now you've got flexibility. And I think flexibility is always a good thing. Right. Let's go back to where we were. Just because you can do this, does it mean that you should? Well, I'm not going to say yes. It's a bit of a harebrained thing to say use filament for all of your features. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. I'm going to give you my opinion. You decide. I think it's good because of the flexibility, as I've said. I also like it because all of the logic around whether a feature should be enabled or disabled is now in one place. I can bring it all to my feature class inside of Pennant. I think that's really understated as a value proposition for something like Pennant, where when you think about all of the complexity that you could have in a very large application, bringing those things into one place is super, super valuable. For me, I'm going to continue doing this. I'm going to find even more of the like weird edge cases, and who knows, maybe I'll be eating my words in a year from now and I'd say, don't listen to that talk that I gave to Laravel Cape Town because that's a complete load of nonsense. But until then, I'm going to keep pushing the boundaries of what should be possible with the tools that I'm using and keep trying to use them in new and interesting ways. I hope this was partly interesting for you and partly has opened your mind to thinking about doing things differently. Um, I would like to say that this is going to be a beneficial thing for you to try, but you've got your projects and your timelines and all of those things. So, as I said before, apply with a pinch of salt and good luck. Please follow me on Pinkery and all the places that I link to from there, if depending on where you want to get updates on all of the stuff that I'm working on. And yeah, thank you very much for watching.
Alrighty. Thanks very much, Simon. That was yeah, that was quite interesting. I definitely didn't think of using pen for this sort of thing before. Um, yeah, it's very interesting to be able to do that for things like subscriptions and the centralization, especially like you mentioned. I can see that over time on growing apps like Laradir, for example, where that becomes a necessity or at least very convenient to have all these things in one place, because then it's not just a subscription, but maybe it's a subscription and an A/B test and this sort of thing. And you can just keep them all in one place. And it's not quite a policy because that's more permission related, but it's also its own thing. So yeah, quite keen on it. I do have one question which I will ask first. Can you give any example in production where you're using this for Laradir, for example? Or would you rather not say?
Yeah, no, I use it for basically all of the features in Laradir. So I mean, there's not much there, but the main thing is like whether somebody gets a certain amount of credits per month, you know. So people who are on a subscription will get an automated top up of the credits, and the number of credits that they get is defined by the level of package that they're on. So I use this in that context, and it works really well. I can switch that on and off very easily for people if I want to just give them that ability. There's some people who I negotiated a different relationship with, let's say from the traditional, like you sign up for your Stripe subscription and then the application just works the way that it works around Stripe. Um, and that's really powerful, like it's really flexible. Yeah. Uh, that's kind of the thrust of where this has come from and like why I think I will try and continue to use this in the future.
100% makes sense. One more question then so far from John. With Pennant, can you easily control the time to live on those cached items, or can you only just purge everything?
That's a good question. I don't think Pennant has that out of the box. I mean, I haven't read the documentation in great detail recently. When it first came out, I kind of got on board with it straight away. It didn't have that then, so I don't know if it does now. But I think even if it doesn't, you could achieve the result um, with something like a scheduled job, and you just you would have you'd have a query that looks for the time maybe of some of those entries in that cache. Like the created at is greater than a certain point in time. Okay, let's clear those ones out. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to use the built-in purge command to do that, but you can achieve the same result as the purge command because it's got some APIs internally for doing purging as well. So you can do it programmatically. So you could create your own command and then add that to the scheduler.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other questions from anyone else? Please post them in the chat if you have them. But yeah, thanks again for giving the talk. In the meantime, I just wanted to check. I know we did the plug at the end, but is there anything else you'd like to add that you're currently working on that you're excited to share?
Well, I am excited for a lot of the stuff that I'm working on in native PHP. And I would love for more people to be trying that out and pushing the boundaries again of what we're doing there. And if you're not sure of whether native PHP is something that you want to use, let's have a chat because I'd love to try and convince you to give it a go. I think it's super powerful, and I think in the next few months we've got some exciting updates coming out which are going to make it very, very I'll say reliable to build production ready applications on.
Great stuff. Yeah, would be keen to have the next talk from you be a demo, like John says. Alrighty, I think that's all for questions. Yeah, next part of our evening is the raffle. But if you're watching from YouTube or another video platform in the future, you're going to miss this one out. We'll check you soon. I'll stop recording here.